Hey everyone, what's going on? My name is Matt. I've got a lot of video requests lately, so I've been doing a ton of coding, and yeah, I'll just be rolling out a few videos over the next several weeks. In today's video, I'm going to be doing it on fluids from a request, so I hope you all enjoy. Okay, here we go. So I just created a tutorial fluid.java, and I just called it this here, tutorial fluids. Public abstract class, and then I made it extend flowable fluid. Now that is a Minecraft class. So let's just get started on writing the code here to make it so that it works. Okay, so got a new line here, and we'll do public boolean matches type. Then we'll make it fluid, so I'll just do fluid here. And then we will make it return a fluid, and we will get the get flowing and get still fluids. So we'll call that here. Okay, so basically what this is going to do is it's going to make a true or false if fluid is either still or flowing. And then we'll use that later, but we'll set this as override. And we'll get a new line here, and then we'll set a protected boolean is infinite. And we'll return this as false because it's not. And we'll set an override as well. And then we'll name protected void before breaking block. So what this does, this performs actions when fluids flow into a replaceable block. So for example, like when water drops on top of this block or vice versa, it could do like an extinguish, or it could just merge into one of the two blocks. So what the setup, I can't speak. So what we'll set this up as is a block entity. So we'll do world access, and then block position, and then the block state. And we'll set a final block entity. And then we'll get the state of the block. And then we'll see if it has a property of get entity. And we'll get block entity. We'll cast a null. And then we'll set it what to do here. So drop stacks. And then this will be state for block state. And this will be world. We'll add in position. And then we'll add in block entity. And we'll set this to override. Okay, next we need to return whether if lava can replace this object, or if it can just kind of flow into a different fluid state. So what we'll do is we'll do protected boolean can be replaced with, and we will set this as fluid state. And we'll set this as block view. S. Direction. Okay. Then we'll return a false, so that cannot be replaced. This will be an override. Can't type today. Okay, I thought we fixed those. Okay, and then next we're going to get the flow speed of the liquid. So we're going to set it as protected again. Integer get flow speed. And we'll add some things here. So world view. And then we'll return so the smaller the number is, the slower it will go, and the bigger the number that it is, the faster it will go. So lava is 2, and water is 4. So let's just set this to 4, just like water. And we'll do another override. All right. So I'll set a couple default settings here. So protected int get level decreased per block. And this will be world view again. Water typically returns a 1 and lava returns a 2, so I will set this as a 1 because we're going with the water theme. So we'll set this to override. Then we'll get the tick rate. So we'll do a public int get tick rate. And then water returns typically 5, and then lava returns 30 in the overworld, and it returns 10 in the nether. So, so water, set this to 5. Another override function. Okay. And then we'll get the blast resistance of the water. So we'll do protected float get blast resistance. And typically water and lava both return 100, so we'll do that. And make sure you put the 100.0f because it's a float. All right, let's move on. So I created under a fluid folder I created in the same directory here. I just created a file called acidfluid.java, and then I did a public abstract class, called it acidfluid, and then I extended the tutorial fluid that I just created here. So next, what we'll have to do is we'll have to set all of the variables. So get fluid. So we're going to do get still first. And then we will return my still fluid. So we'll just leave this blank for now. Okay. And then we'll do a public fluid again, and then get flowing. And then we will return our flowing fluid. We'll return back to these later. I set those up. I haven't set them up yet. So what we'll do here then next is we will set the bucket item. So we'll create a new item here. Get bucket item. And then we will return the bucket item that we will create later. And then we have to do a couple things. So we have to get the block state of the fluid, and then after that, then we have to set up the type of fluid and its logic. So first then, we'll do public block state to block state. And then we'll do fluid state just keep that conventional. Okay. So then typically there's something called method 15741, and it just converts the fluid state of the item to whatever method name that is inside of the fabric logic. So that's created by default. So what I'll do then is I will set the null here just until we figure out what it is. And we'll get default state width and properties. And I'll set this to level 15. And then we will use that method 15741 because it is a fluid state. And then we will use the fluid state that we created in that terms there. Constructor. Okay. That should be good. The only issue is that we need to set the block state. So that's the fluid block. Okay, next we will do a public static class, and then we'll call this flowing extends, and then we'll extend it ourselves, so we'll call this acid fluid, and then we'll set this as protected, void append properties. State manager, builder, and then we'll have to set the fluid, then fluid state, and then we'll set the builder. Okay, and then do a super append properties builder. Okay, and then we'll do the builder add that same property, and then we'll just call this level. Next, we'll do a public int get level. And then we will return fluid state get level, and then in here we'll do fluid state. I'll set that up here. Okay, that's good. Next, we're going to do another public, and then we're going to do a Boolean this time. And then we'll say, is this still true or false? And then this fluid state. And then we'll return false. Okay, that should be good. Okay, we're going to create another public class. And we'll call this still, and then we'll extend our self again, so acid fluid. And then in here we'll create two things. We'll create an integer and a boolean. So we'll do public int get level. And then we'll create this public boolean is still. Then this again is the fluid state. And this is fluid state as well. And then the logic behind this one, we'll just set this to 8. And this will return true. So I guess what this is that by default in Minecraft, there is a fluid state, and it goes between level 1 to 8. And there is some override functions here to set it to level 15. I'm not 100% sure why this is done, but in order to get this fluid to work properly, I guess it's just a workaround. So that's why we set this here, and then later on we transform it into level 15. Okay, and then one last thing too on this page, we're just going to set a bunch of overrides. So I'm just going to copy paste this here. Create an override for each of these. And then log state actually doesn't need one probably. It's probably fine. But what does need one here is this append properties. That one needs one, and that one needs one. And then this one needs one, and this one too. All right, so now we're going to go back to our ModInitializer. So in the same file here that you have your main file name, whatever it is, and then it implements ModInitializer. This is not the client-side one, this is just the regular one. I will go down into our new section that I created here. I call this fluids, and I just made a little section here for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 different fluid types, two different fluid types, still, flowing, and then I create an item, which is the bucket. So let's get started here. Public static flowable fluid, yeah, and then we'll call this still acid, just for demonstration purposes. And then we'll call this public static flowable fluid, and then we'll call this flowing acid. And we'll create one more thing here, static item, and then we'll call this acid bucket. Perfect. Okay. Those things are good. That's all you need. And then we'll go down below in the same file on the onInitialize function. And then I create my own little section here. So I'll just add to it. And then I will start implementing still acid, flowing acid, and then our acid bucket. So first off, it's our still fluid. So we'll do registry, register, and then we got a few things to register here. So it's the fluid, so it's registry, fluid, and then ID, so it's a new identifier. So it'd be the mod ID. You could do a couple ways. So you can do here, so my mod ID is biomes, so you can do that in brackets. And then the name of the actual fluid in the registry, so this is the mod ID. But what I did here is I created a constant up at the top here under ModInitializer, which does the work for me. So all I have to do is just reference biomes mod and then the mod ID in that. So if I go back here, I can actually just replace this with mod ID. You can also, if you're referencing it in another area, like say for example a different Java class, what you can do is you can just do biomes mod dot mod ID, and it'll work. But to keep things short, I'll just use that. Okay, so identifier here. We'll do the namespace and then the string path. So that's the path of what it's looking for when it calls the texture and everything else. And then the entry, this is, I guess, the acid fluid class that we created. So acid fluid. And we're not referencing the right one. We're using still, so we need to use still. Next, so then we'll do registry again. So what I'm going to do then is just save some work. I'm going to copy this whole line. And then we'll set this as a new acid fluid flowing. But then we'll change the identifier here as well. So let's just call this flowing underscore acid. And we'll call this the flowing acid. And that, we'll finish that off, and that's good. Okay. All right, and this one's a bit different. I mean, I'll copy this anyway, but we'll change a couple things. So it isn't a fluid, it's an item. So we'll go here, registry item, and this is a new identifier, and this is acid, let's see, bucket. That will work. And then we'll do a new bucket item. And it's looking for a few things here. So it's looking for item settings, and it's also looking for the fluid type that we either can reference, I guess, a block, fluid state block, or we can reference our own fluid that we created here. So this should work here. And then under settings, we'll just create a new item settings. And then if we use this in a recipe, we can set a recipe remainder. And then you can use the acid, but then what will be left over is just a bucket. So item bucket, I believe. Yeah. And then the max amount you can get of this type is 1. So we'll set that to 1. We'll close that bracket off and fix that. Okay. That's good. Okay, so next what we need to do is we need to add in the water to tag. In order for this to work, you have to set up tags. So that's simple enough. What I ended up doing is going into, anyways, so I went into data, the mod ID. So the mod ID for this specifically will have to be Minecraft, because we are going to append this or add this into the water.json tag list. Otherwise, that won't show up as a water or fluid. So you'll have to do this. So go to data, Minecraft, tags, fluids, and then I created a file called water.json, and then I just copy pasted the default JSON format from Minecraft, or you can just copy it here. And what will be in here is like Minecraft water, lava, etc. So what I did here is I just added mine. So I just called it with the mod ID, and then acid, which is just the block of acid, technically the fluid, and then the flowing as well, the flowing variant. Okay, so from here, once we have set this tag up, we will go back into our main class, and then under fluids, we will set up a new block. So we'll call this block public static block, and we'll just call this acid. And then here, we will set up an acid under ModInitialize. So we'll set that up here, acid equals registry, register. And then registry block new identifier with the namespace and the path. This will be mod ID. And then the path. Path will be the same as this. Here is the still acid, because we want the same texture and model and everything as still acid. The reason why is because we don't want our block to just be a constant flowing acid if it's just sitting there. So we will just take the still acid as the parent. Okay, so now here we'll create just a fluid block here, and then this still acid, and then we'll call this fabric block settings, and then we'll copy an abstract block, which will be just blocks dot water. Okay, something wrong here. There we go. I'm just going to add these squiggly brackets in here because we're extending the fluid block class, which if I go up here, it's net Minecraft block fluid block. Okay, from here, what we're going to do is we're going to add in all of these from our biomesmod.java into acid fluid, because if you remember, we set null as all of these, but now we actually have somewhere to look for and point to. So now we're going to point to biomesmod, and then we're going to set this one to still, and then we're going to set this one to flowing, and then we're going to get the bucket item. So this will be acid bucket. And then here, this is the block state. So this will just be the block itself, so it'll be just the acid. And there we go, that should be good. Maybe I will add an override to this after all. Okay, after we're done that, I'm just going to create a client-side Java class here. So I've called this biomes client. I put it in the same directory as the biomes mod, which is the main initializer and everything else that we have put inside of here. So what this does here is that it just implements the client mod initializer instead. So it's just client-side stuff only, which is like rendering of textures and whatever else, which again is just client-side. So what I'll do is I'll set this environment type to client, and then I created an onInitializer function here, and then I created a little space here for our fluids. So let's get started here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a setup fluid rendering. And then in here, we're going to just call this biomes mod. And we're going to reference still acid, biomes mod, and then flowing acid. And then we're going to create a new identifier, which is the namespace one. And then we are going to reference Minecraft, surprisingly. And then we're going to reference water in Minecraft. And then from there, we can actually apply a tint color, which we will set up here as just this hex number. Okay, so I just went on to Google here, and I just typed in a hex color, and then I got this color green, which is whatever that is, this number, this hex number. So again, that is without the 0x. It's just this portion. So whatever you want, you can make it whatever color, as long as it falls within the hex range. So if you want it to be blue for whatever reason, you can just make it blue, or whatever, copy that, paste it in. Okay, next we're going to do a block render layer map. And we're going to set an instance of putting fluids. So fluids here. Then we get the render layer. So render layer. And we'll set this to get translucent, because water is translucent. And then the fluid that we're going to call is the still acid. So the biomes mod still acid. And then from here, we'll do the flowing as well. So biomes mod flowing acid. Then we'll finish that line off. Okay, and then we'll create a whole new line outside of onInitialize client here. So underneath, call this public static void, and then we will use the setup fluid rendering that we had created up there. And then we will add the logic in here as to what we're calling each individual spot here. So what we'll call this is, I guess, just fluid still. And we'll call this final fluid flowing, final identifier. We'll call this texture fluid ID. And then for here, we'll call this an int, and we'll just call this color. Perfect. Okay, so now we'll create an identifier to still sprite ID. Identifier. And we'll get the namespace. So here, we'll do something a little bit different this time. So we'll do texture fluid ID. And then we'll get the namespace of that fluid ID. And then the path, we'll do something a little bit different here as well. We'll set this to block / plus, and then we'll do the texture fluid ID, get path. And then we will do underscore still. So we'll look for anything called acid, and then we'll add it in this text here, and we'll add in the still part to it at the end. Okay. Next, we'll do another identifier here. This will be flowing sprite ID. This would be a new identifier again. Just to save some work here, I'm just going to copy all this, paste that into there. And this will be block again. And then instead of still, it'll just be underscore flow. All right, so on the client side, we will do a client sprite registry callback. So it's this one, and then we'll set an event. And we'll have to add it to the Atlas texture. So it's called sprite Atlas texture, and then the block Atlas texture. And then here, we'll set a register, and then we'll find the listener. So we'll listen to the two identifiers that we just created up here. So for this listener, we'll have to do a lambda function. So within that, we will look for two different things. One of those being is Atlas texture. Then we will look for the registry. And then the lambda function, we'll just enter in a new line here. And then we'll create brackets here. And then from here, we'll just call the ID that we just created, the identifier. So we'll call this one first. And then second, we will call the one below that. So I'll copy this and paste that below. And then we will get the flowing sprite ID. And then we'll clean this up a bit. Just put that inside there. So that's just one line. Okay. Perfect. Okay, next, we're going to have to create a couple more identifiers. So we're going to write some custom functions here, identifier. Then we'll call this fluid ID. And then we'll register. Registry. And then we're looking for fluid. So yeah, here we go. Fluid, and then we'll set get ID. And then the fluid entry, which is the entry that we had set it up as from the beginning. So that's this guy here. From this. Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, and then we'll do another final identifier. And we'll do a listener. ID, and we'll do a new identifier with a namespace. And then this will be fluid ID, get namespace. And the path is the fluid ID here. So that's fluid ID, and then we'll get the path for that. And then we'll set a custom string here. Call this underscore reload listener. And close off that bracket. Do the final sprite array. We'll set this fluid sprites. That's the name. And then we'll set up an array. And then we'll just call this null. All right. Now we need to use resource manager helper, and we're going to use all of these identifiers and the sprite that we just created. So we're going to resource manager helper get resource type. So this will be resource type. This will be client resources. And then we'll register reload listener. And then the listener will be a new, I guess, a simple asynchronous resource. Reload listener, yeah, that's the one. I'll take out the cast here. I don't need that. And within that, we'll set up an override function, and then we'll call this public identifier, and we'll use the get fabric ID. Get fabric ID, and we'll return listener ID. And then next, we're going to get the sprite from the block atlas where the resources are loaded. And so it'll know when to do that. So we'll set an override function to set up here public void apply, and then we're looking for that resource manager here again. Okay, and then we'll set this final, and then we'll set a function. And within this function, it's just an identifier and a sprite. This is Atlas. And this will be Minecraft client. Get instance. And then we'll need to get this sprite instance of the block Atlas texture. So I think the identifier ID, which is this guy here and this guy here. So sprite Atlas texture, block Atlas texture. And then we'll sort of close that off with a semicolon. And then we'll set up the fluid sprites from the sprite array that we created. So it'll be fluid sprites 0. And then we'll do Atlas apply. And this is the identifier. So the identifier that we created above, which will be still sprite ID, I think. Yeah, still sprite ID. And then I'll just copy this line, paste that below, and then use the 1 in the array. And then this one will be flowing sprite ID instead. All right, now past all of this will be another function. So we'll call this final fluid render handler. And then we'll call this just render handler. And then we'll call this new fluid render handler. Okay. And set up an override function. Then we will call public sprite array. And then we'll get fluid sprites. And this will be block render view. Set that to view. And then block position. So just block POS. Fluid state. And then call this state. Okay. And then from here, we'll just return fluid sprites. And then underneath this, we'll create another override function. Call that public int get fluid color. then pretty much the exact same thing as that line. So put that into there. And then we will return a color. Okay. So now, underneath all of that, one more thing here. So we got a fluid render handler registry. And then we'll set the instance to register, and then we'll do a fluid, and then a render handler. So we'll do this one, and then we'll reference still, which is this guy, and then we'll reference flowing as well from that guy. So still, and then render handler, because we're not using that yet. Copy that from here. Then I need to create another one, so copy one more line. And then instead of still, it's just flowing. Perfect. Okay. And that is the two set up there. Okay, so just to fix that red line here, I just went to here. I accidentally used the wrong loader, so it's just simple synchronous resource reload listener. And that'll fix that. Okay. Now the final step, after everything, is to add in all of your block states and all of the JSON files. So what I did here is I went into resources, assets, your mod ID, so mine's biomes, block states, and then within block states I called this one called asset.json, and then I just copy pasted that into there. It's pretty much just a basic model file just from Minecraft. So yeah, feel free to use that. And then in the let's see, models, in the same mod ID under models, I put under the folder block, and I call this one asset.json as well. And so what this is it's just another texture. It's calling the water still particle. So when you're swimming in it or whatever, it looks like water. So that's what that is. It's basically the block. It just looks like clear water. Yeah, okay. And then under models, under item, I created an asset bucket.json. And so then I just did this. So again, the mod ID, and then item bucket, so that's the texture. We'll get to that in a sec. Then under textures, within this mod ID, and under block, I did acid flow. So basically what I did is I just copied Minecraft's water texture. So that's what that looks like. It's just basically a giant, just a giant texture with a Minecraft meta file to signify the animation. Then I did the asset still as well. So this is just when it's sitting around doing nothing. Again, with the meta, I set the frame time to 2, just because that's regular water typically. The higher you go, obviously, is like lava or whatever else. And then under textures item, I created an item called asset_bucket.png. So basically what I did was I just created a bucket, and then I went into Photoshop or whatever photo editing tool, and I just added the color in here. I think I used milk as the base, and then I just changed the color of the milk in here to the green color that we had picked as the hex color earlier. So I just used the milk bucket here. So, just one thing you need to make sure that you do is that you go into fabric.mod.json. So if you go into here, you'll see that you'll get this big JSON file. Under your entry points, if you don't see client in there, add it. So under main, you'll see this square bracket. So what I did is just added a comma, and then I added client. What I did is I just added in the biomes client file here that we created. So biomes client, and so it just loads this separately as a client-only entry point. Now we can click save and launch and see if it works. Okay, here we go. So I just gave myself the asset bucket. Just looks like this. I didn't add a lang file to it, but yeah, this is it. This is what it looks like. And yeah, you can swim in it, just like normal. And there's your custom fluid. It works just like other fluids too, which is cool. You can just take a bucket, empty bucket, and it's gone. Cool. Well, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for new videos coming. I've got a bunch coming. I got at least 10. So yeah, if you want to get notifications when my new videos are out, hit that notification bell down below. If you guys found this video helpful, make sure to find that thumbs up button and just give it a smash. And if you haven't already subscribed, consider doing so. Yeah, any video requests also, make sure to leave them down in the comment section below.